Hey there, and welcome to Edit My Photo for March 2022. Fiona's image of Patsy, the brindle boxer, has a lot of potential, and in this edit we're going to be bringing out some detail and colour and adding some life, as well as straightening up that crooked horizon without losing Patsy's feet. Feel free to follow along from start to finish or fast track through the tutorial using the chapter links down below. And as always, if you liked the video, please subscribe for more pet photography, shooting and editing tips and tricks. Hi, I'm Charlotte Reeves from Unleashed Education, and you've tuned in to another Edit My Photo Winners Edit. We run this free editing challenge in our Unleashed Education community every month. It goes through a few different stages. Firstly, Craig and I take turns to submit one of our raw images for members of the challenge to download and edit. For this challenge, I submitted this raw image of Opal. The winner of the challenge was Fiona with her clean but moody edit, where she did a great job of giving Opal a virtual bath. As the winner of the challenge, Fiona submitted one of her images for me to edit. In this edit, I'll be adding some light and contrast to Patsy while also applying some selective sharpening, as well as bringing out the colour and life that's hiding in that raw file. I'll also be straightening the image using a clever technique that doesn't require cropping too close or cutting off Patsy's feet, which are very close to the edges of the frame. Make sure you watch all the way to the end so you can see the final result. And as always, I welcome your questions and feedback in the comments.
So first up, let's do some global adjustments to see if we can get a bit more color and life out of this image. I can see it all lurking there in the raw file. So to start with, we'll take the shadows up quite a way because we really want to start seeing some more detail in the dog here. I'm going to take the highlights down a little and then push the whites up, just to get a bit more contrast at the top end of the histogram here. Now I can see there's a gap at the bottom of the histogram, which indicates that the dark tones in the image aren't as dark as they could be, so the image isn't really fulfilling its tonal potential. So I'm going to take that slider down a bit too, and then push the shadows up even more, I think. Now white balance wise, it possibly looks a little green, maybe add a little bit of tint, and it could possibly look a little bit warm as well. Now there was some very, bright late afternoon sun coming from the right hand side onto the side of the dog here. So I don't think it would look wrong if this image was a little bit warmer, and it will also sort of help to bring out these sort of sunset twilighty tones in the rest of the image as well. I'm going to add a little bit of extra clarity and some vibrance, and then maybe take that down a bit. And then add a bit more contrast using the sliders under the tone curve here by taking the lights up and the darks down a little, maybe highlights down. Now the rest of the changes to the image I'm going to achieve with some local adjustments using the masks here in Lightroom. First up, I'm going to try and get a bit more detail out of the dog. So let's do a select subject. It's done a pretty good job of selecting the subject there. I don't think I need to fix that at all. I'm going to turn the mask overlay off before I start moving the sliders by pressing O on the keyboard. It will turn it off automatically when you start using those sliders, but I like to see a starting point before I start making changes. So O it is. Now we need some shadow filling here to get a bit more detail in the dog. We need to take the blacks down a bit to get some more contrast, whites up for a bit more contrast, highlights down so we don't sort of start blowing out this area. This is a bit of a concern, an area of concern just here for me along the edge of the rib cage there. That's really picking up that late afternoon sun, so we'll have to be careful we don't blow that out. I think even those little changes so far have made a good difference to the look of the dog. Let's add some texture. Texture is really good for, strangely enough, bringing out texture, particularly in fur. So extra texture is definitely a good thing. Maybe some clarity, again, that's good for bringing out detail and detail we do want. Now I've zoomed in here a little bit and I'm noticing that the sort of the chest and the shoulder and the neck of the dog is a little bit more sharp than the face. So I think the focus may be sort of a little bit behind where it needs to be in this image. So we're going to have to work extra hard to get some sharpness and detail back in the face again. It's not something that can't be rescued, but we just need to make a point of actually doing that. So I think the dog is looking pretty good. We can possibly take the color temperature down a little bit even. A little bit too warm, I think. We want to get that brindle looking really nice and warm, but we also don't want to just sort of make it look yellow. So we'll take the temperature down a little bit. I'm just going to take those blacks up a little bit more. I feel like it was starting to block up a little bit in the dark areas at the feet there. So I think that's kind of fixed that. Now, I kind of feel like the head and the face and the top of the neck needs a bit more work than the rest of the body. So I'm going to add another mask. Again, it'll be select subject, and then I'm going to intersect that mask with a brush. So if you hold down Option on the keyboard, the add and subtract buttons actually change to an intersect button. And what that does, it allows you to add another brush to that group, and wherever that other brush goes and your original brush goes, wherever they intersect, that's what your selection is. So Option, intersect with a brush, and then I'm going to brush over the face and head. Now see where that brush goes, it's not going outside the bounds of the dog because it's intersecting it with the selection of the dog. So it's a really good way to select just part of the subject. Now I'll turn that overlay off and I'm going to kind of do what I did before. So let me just turn that off and on. See how that's really brought some extra contrast and detail into the dog's head and face. I think that's good. Okay, next up, the sky. So let's do a select sky. It's done a pretty good job. I'm just going to switch to the mask overlay mode called white on black, because that will give me a better idea what has actually been selected. Now I can see here the white area is the selected area, and you can see it's gone into the edges of the dog a little bit and on the white markings of the dog. I definitely don't want any sky adjustments applying to any part of the dog, so I'm going to subtract the subject from this. See how the subject's gone completely black now? That's what we wanted. So I'll change that color overlay mode back. The reason I changed it to white on black is sometimes it's hard to see exactly where it's going if you just leave it on the color overlay mode with the red overlay. So I'm going to turn that overlay off, and now the fun begins. Let's make this sky look better. So I feel it's like a little bit lemony at the moment, so I might want to take the tint up a little. I'm going to take the exposure down a touch, maybe the highlights down. White, don't want to mess with that too much or it's going to make the sky look a little bit flat and grey. Let me try exposure down a little bit again. Yeah, I think we can definitely do with that. Should I make it cooler? Ooh, maybe a little cooler. A little bit more magenta on the tint. I think that's pretty good. Let's have a look at the before and after on the sky. Yeah, I think that's looking good. Something else that I think will really help with this is to try and get the sea looking a bit bluer. So it looks a bit grey at the moment. I'm going to do another selection, this time with the brush, and I'm going to click auto mask this time. I'm going to take the flow and the density right up, and then I'm going to select the water. So because I'm just sort of going along fairly close to the edge, and because I've got auto mask turned on, Lightroom will kind of detect the edges. Now it's gone over a little bit in some parts. So I'm just going to go in, zoom in and change the brush to erase mode. Again with auto mask ticked, and I'm just going to go back on this selection a bit. So you don't need to create a new mask group. You can just click erase within that one brush that you're using. I want to make sure it doesn't go over the legs. I don't think it's going over the border here at all. That should be pretty good. Let's just check that by taking it to the white on black mode. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. Turn that off, and I'm basically just going to change the color temperature here. So I'm going to make the sea a little bit bluer. So I think that's quite nice. Now looking at this, I kind of feel like the entire background could be a little bit darker. So instead of messing around with masks to achieve that, I'm just going to take the overall exposure down a little. See how that really starts to bring some more color into the sky? I'm then going to go in and adjust the sky so that the exposure isn't taken down quite so much. Just trying to even out the lighting a little bit, and then go back into the dog mask and maybe give a little bit more exposure here and not take the blacks down quite so much. I feel like that creates a better balance between the subject and the background, and it doesn't look quite so fake. That can be the problem that you come across whenever you've got a very dark subject and a very light background, is you end up with that sort of fake look because it's your brain telling you that that can't happen in that situation. Okay, so happy with this in Lightroom. I'm going to take this into Photoshop, and we're going to deal with the elephant in the room, which is the horizon not being straight. We're going to do a content aware crop and a few other little bits and pieces as well. So I'll see you over there. So here in Photoshop, the first thing we're going to attack is the horizon. Now, if I were to straighten the horizon in Lightroom, I would have actually ended up cropping off part of the dog's legs and throwing away a lot of the image that I actually needed because it's so tight in this corner here. Instead, I'm going to do a content aware crop. That's why I've brought it into Photoshop to do that. So if we press C on the keyboard, and I'm going to make sure it locks to the same ratio. So I'm going to say original ratio. I want to tick content aware because I'm actually going to crop outside the bounds of the image, and Photoshop is going to fill in those areas for me. So if I click at the top corner here and straighten this. Now, a quick and easy way to get a nice straight horizon is to use this little ruler tool. So you can grab this from up in the properties of the tool, the crop tool, and then you just click at one end of the horizon and then drag and click it at the other end of the horizon. Try and make sure you get it nice and straight, and then let go. So that's actually straightened that image up perfectly now. Now, as you can see how much we would have been losing if we'd have tried to crop this in Lightroom inside the bounds of the image. We couldn't really get a good crop without cropping off part of the dog. But now that we're in Photoshop, we can crop out a little bit more. So I'm going to use as much of the image as we can. I don't want to ask too much of Photoshop because it may do some weird stuff that's difficult to fix, but let's just try this to start with. Happy with that. I'm going to press return on the keyboard. Right, so it's filled in all of those corners quite well. The only thing it hasn't done a particularly great job of is this edge here. Now we're going to need to reconstruct that manually. Now, I've gone through a lot of trouble fixing up that corner, but now I'm kind of thinking, does that even need to be like that? I'm not sure that it does. I'm wondering if we can get away with completely doing away with that bit of bare concrete on the edge there, and maybe just making it a continuation of this bit here instead. Grabbing a nice big brush with the clone stamp tool and just sort of cloning in sections of this other part of this wall, because I think that was actually quite eye-catching with that there, and I didn't really like it. Okay, I think that definitely is looking better. I don't think there's anything down there that overly draws the eye away from the subject now, so definitely an improvement. Now we've got the horizon nice and straight, we've got the crop fixed up. I'm going to do some tidying up on the face of the dog. I was going to jump straight to doing some sharpening on the dog's face, but while I was in there, I noticed that there is quite a bit of noticeable chromatic aberration along the edge of the dog here. It's quite purple, it's quite eye-catching. It may have been there in the original, it may have been accentuated by the fact that we adjusted the dog and the sky differently. The good news is we can fix it. So to fix this, I'm going to add a color adjustment layer. So I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to grab the brush, be on the keyboard. I'm going to set the brush color to a brownish kind of color that's really similar to the fur color along the edge there, probably that kind of color there. And I'm going to carefully draw along the edge here. Okay, I think I've got all those bits. Next, I'm going to set the blending mode of that layer to hue or color. Hue or color. I think color works nicely. Now, let's zoom in and have a look. Let's turn that off and on. See how that's just gotten rid of that chromatic aberration? So it's actually changed that purple fringing just to a more neutral color, which blends in much more nicely along the edge of the dog there. Could even just add this a little bit along here as well, because you can just see it on the nose, the edge of the nose as well. And if you find the color doesn't blend very well, you can always just change the color to more of a brownish kind of color if it's along the edge where it's a bit darker. Okay, let's fix that up. Let's flatten that. Now I'm going to sharpen up the dog's face using Topaz, so I'll just duplicate the background layer so I can apply the sharpening to that layer. That will allow me to mask out areas I don't want the sharpening to apply to. So I'm going to go to Sharpen. Now it's chosen as the preset out of focus very blurry. I think it might be onto something there, because look at the difference between these two. On the left you've got the original, on the right you have the sharpened version. So I think that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to click apply here. Now if I turn this sharpened layer off and on, you can really see the difference there. Now we don't want to apply this to the whole image because it's done some kind of funky stuff in the background here and tried to sharpen things that don't necessarily need to be sharp. I only really want to apply it to the dog's face. So I'm going to add a black mask to this layer by pressing Option and clicking on the new mask icon. And then I'm going to switch to the brush, pressing B on the keyboard. Make sure it's a white brush, so you can press D to bring up default colors in the swatches here, which gives you white as a foreground color. And I'm going to make that brush a bit bigger, and I'm going to paint with a white brush into this black mask to reveal part of that sharpened layer. So I've just painted over the face, the eyes. Now it's done some kind of funky stuff when it's sharpened the fur here, which I'm not a huge fan of. So once we've got this covering the area we want, which I think is about that, I'm just going to take the opacity of this sharpened layer down a bit so it's not quite so obvious. So I'm going to take that down to like probably about there. So that's about 68% opacity, and that's definitely an improvement from what it was, but also it's not giving you all those sort of weird grainy effects that sometimes Topaz can give you. Okay, let's have a look at this now. I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to flatten that down. Now, looking at the image objectively, overall, there's at least 2 things I think I need to remove. They seem to be minor, but one of them is this little bit of fur sort of sticking up on the dog's neck. I'm not really a fan of that, so I'm going to just select that and then content aware that away, which I think is better. And there's also a darker patch down on the rock here that's just sort of dragging my eye a little. So very easy to get rid of those 2 things. So I'm going to save this and take it back into Lightroom. There's one more little tweak that I want to do, and then we're going to also do the final crop there in Lightroom. So I'll see you there. So here's the final edited PSD file back in Lightroom. This is where I like to do all my final cropping. Now, looking at the histogram here, I think we could just get a touch more contrast out of this image. It's got a lovely soft look to it, but I think in the dog especially, we can get some more contrast there. So let's just do a final select subject, turn the overlay off, and then I'm just going to take the blacks down a touch and the whites up a little. Now that's just added just a bit of extra contrast into the dog. I'm going to take the highlights down a touch because we don't want to blow out that little edge bit there. But I think that's the final finishing touch that this image needed. Now let's look at the crop. So R on the keyboard. I'd like to crop it so that I'm not quite seeing that little bit there. I could have removed it, but I decided not to because I figure I'd just crop it out. So I think a good final crop would be something like this, with that eye on the top 3rd line, lots of negative space for the dog to look at, nothing distracting in the image. Yeah, I think I'm happy with that. Okay, well that's it. That's the final edit. Thanks so much to Fiona for supplying this image, and congratulations on winning the recent Edit My Photo challenge. I'll be back in another couple of months for another Edit My Photo winners edit. So I'll see you then. Bye.
Hi, me again. If you're wondering how you can get involved in these editing challenges and be in with the chance to have one of your images edited by myself or Craig, it's easy. You just need to opt in to the free Edit My Photo online hub. This is where we set new editing challenges every month, announce the winner, post a wrap-up, and also share the winner's edit in a tutorial just like this one. We also create a comprehensive editing tutorial, we call them Unleashed Edits, of the raw file that we set for the challenge. This resource is available for purchase individually, but also included in our Unleashed Education membership, a paid premium membership with access to our extensive pet photography courses, educational videos, ebooks, guest artist videos, editing tutorials, 4 monthly live group coaching calls, and of course our super friendly members only Facebook group. Through the membership, Craig and I share all of our best shooting and editing education, everything you need to become a better pet photographer, plus stacks of inspiration packed up in a fantastic, friendly, worldwide community. But to get you started, Craig and I would love to have you join in on these free Edit My Photo challenges. If you'd like to find out more, check out the link in the description.